Anthropic has just been blacklisted by the federal government. What does that mean for you? What are some of the key takeaways that you need to know about? That's what I want to talk about today. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney. For over 20 years, I've drafted and negotiated a variety of software-related contracts and litigated failed software projects throughout the country. So what happened? Well, President Trump ordered all federal agencies to immediately cease using Anthropic technology with a 6-month phase-out window. And then shortly after that, the Department of Defense went further, classifying Anthropic as a supply chain risk to national security. And that's the same language that they once used to cut Huawei out of the telecom networks. And it's traditionally been applied to, foreign actors, not a domestic U.S. company. And so in short, I think the reality here is that the U.S. government has treated Anthropic like a domestic supplier that is too risky for critical systems and is pressuring its partners to remove Anthropic completely. And I think, there's certainly politics involved here, but there are broader lessons to be learned when you're utilizing certainly AI functionality, or you are utilizing any kind of critical component in your ERP system or in your broader technology stack in general. And so let's get into it. So what are the takeaways? And I think, lesson one, the government is fully prepared to use supply chain risk powers against domestic vendors, not just foreign users or foreign vendors as it traditionally has. And all it took was a dispute over, AI safety rules and autonomous weapons for Anthropic to be sidelined. Lesson two, AI risk has become essentially infrastructure risk. Once artificial intelligence tools are embedded in your ERP system, driving forecasting, using it for coding assistance or procurement, whatever it is, the underlying model provider becomes part of your operational backbone. And I think that is a risk. There's going to be certainly we would deem arbitrary regulations applied to your utilization of that technology. Thinking more broadly about it, if there is just kind of a change in the regulatory scheme, you've got to be able to figure out how you're going to address this. And I mean, the reality is, and this would be the third lesson or the third takeaway, relying on a single foundation model is a fragile strategy. It's certainly something that is ill-advised, and I think you can see that playing out right now. If every AI-driven function in your ERP system depends on one vendor, you have a problem. What if that vendor is banned, if it collapses? What happens to your core operations? I mean, are you then, at a standstill? Are you put out of business because of this? You've got to plan for these types of events. You've got to account for them in the way that you deal with your vendors, and to the extent there's any kind of contractual framework that you can negotiate that's going to account for that, you've got to include it. And, no surprise there is. How do you mitigate the risk? From a practical perspective, there really are, I'd say, 4 or 5 steps that I think you need to be thinking of to manage this kind of risk with not only your AI vendors, but any kind of technology vendor that becomes or provides some sort of mission critical functionality for your business. And the first one really is inventory your exposure. You really want to start by mapping out exactly, where AI models or critical technology live inside your systems. You're looking at co-pilots, low code platform analytics, document processing. You want to look at everything. How are you utilizing this artificial intelligence technology or mission critical technology? For government contractors, certainly, you've got to cross-check that map against your federal project list to see whether any of those AI touch points fall under compliance scrutiny. The second takeaway from this, you've got to think about this as a practical steps here. And I think you've got to look at this headline generating event as kind of an opportunity to assess your situation. And part of that would be, you tighten your third-party screening. Make sure your vendors, your IT suppliers, that you're screening them against government exclusion, government regulations, that you have an understanding of what they're complying with, what they're not complying with, to the extent that you can. I think most organizations already do some kind of basic screening for sanctions, but I think really few extend that out to, subcontractors, sub vendors that are buried inside their ERP, and they certainly aren't thinking about that in the AI context. That's where, some substantive blind spots are going to be living within your organization. And the next thing is, you're going to want to mandate a multi-model and portability in design approach to this. You're going to want to push your ERP and AI vendors to support multiple foundation models. They can't just be locked in. The other thing you want to take this as an opportunity to do is really update your contracts. Modern ERP contracts, I think, now need to include language around AI vendor designations. You've got to require vendors to represent that neither they nor their key model providers appear on any kind of supply chain risk lists or any other kind of sanctions list or ban list. If one of them does get designated, your agreement should spell out a remediation plan and how that issue is going to be solved. And then next, I think you really want to treat AI vendor dependence like cybersecurity or audit risk. Taking a step back, I mean, why does all this really matter? And the Anthropic story isn't just about one AI company. It's about recognizing that AI is now part of ERP infrastructure, and it's not really an optional function. It's something that is critical, it's embedded, and you need to treat it that way. The takeaway is simple. I mean, make sure your AI layer is portable, your contracts are protective, and your governance teams know exactly what's in your technology stack. If you have any questions about anything I've discussed in this video, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to you and get you pointed in the right direction.